Dawn crept over Paris like a gray shroud, heavy with mist and the sour smell of the river, pressing itself against the walls of the conciergerie as though the city itself wished to peer inside. Marie Antoinette sat upright on the narrow wooden bench that served as her bed, her back straight despite the ache that had settled into her bones after months of confinement. Sleep had abandoned her long before the first pale light filtered through the barred window. She had spent the night listening to the prison breathe, the distant coughs of other inmates, the clank of chains, the slow, relentless drip of water striking stone and counting down the hours she had left. She wore a simple white dress, hastily sewn, the fabric coarse against her skin. It was a color she once associated with celebration and elegance, now chosen because it was plain and easily washed. Her hair, once powdered and arranged by skilled hands, had been roughly cut short at the nape of her neck, uneven and humiliating, a preparation for the blade that awaited her. When she lifted a hand to touch it, her fingers trembled despite her efforts to still them. The mirror had been taken long ago, but she knew what she would see: a woman aged beyond her years, cheeks hollowed, eyes ringed with shadow, the last traces of royalty stripped away layer by layer. As the light grew stronger, footsteps echoed in the corridor. She recognized the rhythm immediately: guards changing, keys rattling, the sound of authority wrapped in iron. The door opened with a groan, and cold air rushed into the cell. One of the men read the order in a flat, indifferent tone, as though announcing the movement of furniture rather than the end of a life. Marie Antoinette listened without interruption. She nodded once when he finished, her lips pressed together, her chin lifting slightly in a final gesture of control. She rose on her own, smoothing her dress with slow, deliberate movements. Each step through the narrow corridor felt heavy, as if the stones beneath her feet were pulling her down, eager to claim her before the scaffold could. She brushed her fingers against the damp walls as she passed, the chill seeping into her skin. These walls had heard her weep, had witnessed her pacing, had enclosed her while the world beyond decided her fate. She wondered briefly if they would remember her after she was gone. Outside, the morning air struck her face, sharp and biting. Paris was already awake. Vendors called out, carts rattled over cobblestones, and the murmur of a gathering crowd drifted toward her like distant thunder. A wooden cart waited in the courtyard, rough-hewn and scarred, its boards stained dark from previous journeys. The sight of it tightened her chest. She climbed in without assistance, refusing to show weakness, and sat with her back straight as the guards secured her. The cart lurched forward, and the prison receded behind her. Paris unfolded street by street, a city she had once known from gilded coaches and palace balconies now revealed at eye level, raw and unforgiving. Faces crowded close, men with hollow cheeks and burning eyes, women clutching children, soldiers standing stiff and watchful. Some shouted insults, their voices sharp with years of hunger and anger. Others stared in silence, curiosity and discomfort warring in their expressions. A few crossed themselves quickly, furtively, as if afraid of being seen. Marie Antoinette met their gazes one by one. She did not lower her eyes. She had learned long ago that a queen was expected to be seen, even when she wished to disappear. Bells tolled from distant churches, the sound fractured by the cries of the crowd. With each turn of the wheels, the city felt less familiar, as though she were traveling not only through streets but through layers of memory, shedding one life after another. As the cart moved closer to its destination, the crowd thickened. The air grew heavy with the smell of sweat, smoke, and something darker beneath it all, a metallic tang that made her stomach tighten. She knew what it was before she saw it. When the guillotine finally came into view, rising stark and angular against the pale morning sky, it seemed impossibly tall, an instrument designed not just to kill but to dominate the space around it. The blade itself was hidden for the moment, but its presence was unmistakable, a promise hanging in the air. Her heart began to race, a frantic flutter she could not control. She pressed her hands together, knuckles whitening, and forced herself to breathe slowly. Memories surged without warning, her mother's voice echoing through distant halls, the weight of the crown placed upon her head, the laughter of her children running through gardens that now felt like a story told by someone else. The cart jolted, and she swayed, steadying herself with effort. She wondered if the people shouting could see the fear behind her composed expression, if they could sense how thin the wall was between dignity and terror. The cart slowed, then stopped. For a moment, the noise seemed to dull, as if the world had taken a collective breath. Marie Antoinette stood, her legs unsteady, and stepped down onto the ground. The wood of the scaffold loomed ahead, darkened by use, the sawdust at its base already damp despite the cool air. She felt the eyes of thousands upon her, weighing her, judging her, consuming her final moments as spectacle. She lifted her head and walked forward. Each step felt deliberate, final, echoing in her ears louder than the cries of the crowd. The past and the present collided within her, grief and regret mixing with a strange calm that settled over her like a cloak. She had been Queen of France. She was now simply a woman walking toward death, carrying the weight of a nation's fury and her own shattered world into the shadow of the blade. The scaffold creaked beneath Marie Antoinette's feet as she stepped onto it, the wood rough and uneven, worn smooth in places by the passage of countless condemned bodies. The sound rose above the crowd like a complaint, a tired groan from an instrument that had already done too much work that morning. The air here felt different, thicker, closer, heavy with the smell of damp sawdust and blood that no amount of washing could truly erase. She paused for the briefest moment, steadying herself, aware that every hesitation was being watched, judged, remembered. Charles-Henri Sanson, the executioner, approached her with professional calm. His clothes were clean, his movements precise, as though this were an ordinary task, like sharpening a blade or tying a knot. As he reached for her arm to guide her forward, her foot caught slightly on the edge of a plank. Instinctively, without thought, she murmured, "Pardon, monsieur." The words were soft, almost lost beneath the roar of the crowd, but those close enough heard them. In that instant, the woman who had once been queen revealed herself not through command or defiance, but through habit, politeness ingrained so deeply it survived even here. Her hands were bound behind her back with coarse rope that bit into her wrists. She felt the fibers scrape her skin, a sharp, grounding pain that anchored her to the present. The noise of the crowd surged and receded like the sea, voices overlapping, curses and cheers blending into a single, relentless sound. Somewhere, a drum began to roll, slow and ominous, its rhythm echoing in her chest. She swallowed, her mouth dry, her tongue heavy. Sanson guided her toward the plank. She could see the lunette now, the curved wooden frame waiting to cradle her neck. The sight made her breath hitch despite her efforts to remain composed. She was gently but firmly positioned, told to kneel, then to lie forward. The wood beneath her was cold, leaching warmth from her body. As she lowered herself, the world narrowed. The crowd became a blur of sound and color at the edges of her vision, while above her, the sky opened wide. She stared upward, at a pale expanse streaked with thin clouds drifting lazily across the blue. It struck her as cruelly beautiful, this ordinary sky continuing its slow, indifferent motion while her life reached its abrupt end. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. Fear surged, raw and uncontrollable, clawing at her chest. She had known this moment would come, had imagined it in the long, sleepless nights of imprisonment, yet the reality of it pressed upon her with unbearable force. As Sanson adjusted her position, placing her neck into the lunette, memories flooded her mind without order or mercy. She saw Versailles in sunlight, the glittering halls alive with music and movement. She heard her children's laughter, felt the weight of small hands in hers. She remembered her mother's letters, full of instruction and expectation, urging her to be strong, to be worthy. Regret followed close behind, regret for blindness, for excess, for a world she had never fully understood until it turned against her. The lunette closed around her neck with a dull wooden knock. The pressure was uncomfortable but not painful, a final restraint holding her in place. Her cheek rested against the plank, and she could smell the wood clearly now, old, damp, tinged with iron. Her heart hammered so fiercely she thought it might burst before the blade could fall. For an instant, she considered screaming, begging, anything to delay the inevitable. Instead, she clenched her jaw and focused on the sky, refusing to let the crowd see her break. The drumroll quickened. The noise of the crowd rose in anticipation, thousands of voices straining toward the same moment. She felt Sanson's hands withdraw. There was nothing left to do, nothing left to say. Time seemed to stretch, each second expanding painfully, until she existed only in that suspended space between breath and silence. Then came the sound, a swift, heavy rush of metal released, followed by the brutal finality of impact. The blade fell cleanly, its speed mercifully efficient. Her body convulsed once, reflexively, before going still. Blood poured onto the plank and down into the basket below, soaking the sawdust, releasing a sharp metallic scent that hung in the air. Steam rose faintly where warm blood met cool morning. For a heartbeat, there was a strange, collective pause, as though the crowd needed a moment to register what had been done. Then the Place de la Révolution erupted. Cheers thundered upward, hats and fists raised high. Cries of triumph and laughter drowned out the fading echo of the blade. The revolution had claimed its most famous victim, and the people reveled in the proof of their power. Sanson lifted the severed head by the hair, holding it aloft as custom demanded. The face, once so carefully painted and powdered, was pale now, the features slackening, the eyes half closed, the mouth slightly open. For an instant, the expression seemed almost peaceful, emptied of fear and struggle alike. As the executioner turned the head toward the crowd, another wave of noise surged forward, louder and more frenzied than before. Some in the crowd pressed closer, desperate for a better look, while others turned away, suddenly uneasy, confronted with the stark reality behind their shouts. Blood dripped from the raised head, darkening the wood below. The body lay crumpled, already losing its identity, reduced to flesh and cloth. Soon, the ritual moved on. The remains were removed, the scaffold hastily cleaned, fresh sawdust scattered to soak up what could not be scrubbed away. The crowd began to disperse, conversation turning quickly to other matters, food, politics, the next execution. By midday, the square would look almost ordinary again, the guillotine standing ready for its next victim. But the image lingered in the minds of those who had truly watched. A fallen queen meeting death with quiet composure beneath an open sky, her life ending not with a cry or a curse, but with the sharp, final sound of a blade and the roar of a nation convinced it was witnessing justice.